Hello and welcome to a Scoutcrafts video. I'm going to show you how to tie the 2217 knot covering or globe knot from Ashley's Book of Knots in Paracord. I've adapted the Ashley diagram into something that works better with noticeboard pins and Paracord, and you should find a link to download that PDF in the video description. First of all, the equipment. To protect the table, I've got an old chopping board, though you could use a craft mat or something similar. I've got a few bits of corrugated cardboard, which is going to be where we stick the noticeboard pins. You'll need a few layers of that so the pins stick in properly. Here are my noticeboard pins. They're the ordinary push type pins with this bevel here, which is great for guiding paracord around corners. Next is the paracord itself. I've got two 3-metre pieces here, but you can use one 6-metre piece if you want to. This knot was tied with a single 6-metre piece of rainbow paracord, which gives quite a nice effect. Here's the knot pattern and the instructions. And I've also got to make a core for the knot. For this knot, tied in paracord, the core should be just a little over 3 centimetres in diameter. You could use something like these polystyrene balls, but I've found that using something a bit more forgiving works better. This is an offcut of an old black bin liner. There's enough here so that when you squeeze it tight, it makes a ball just over 3 centimetres in diameter. However, instead of using it as a tight, scrunched up ball, I tape it in a more relaxed, bigger ball. The bigger the core starts, the easier it is to visualise and control the knot when you start tightening it. Now to pin the pattern to the cardboard. All you have to do is pin wherever you see a solid black circle on the pattern. These are the corners that the paracord will turn around. Now the pattern is pinned to the cardboard backing, we have all the corners of the pattern ready to go. First, choose which colour of paracord you're going to start with. We need it to run around the pattern starting at the S point. This tail end, however, tends to get in the way. You could tape the end down close to the S position. However, I'm going to poke a hole through the paper and the cardboard at the S position and push one end of the paracord through. Then turn the board over and put a knot right in the end to stop it pulling back through the cardboard. The next step is to follow the knot pattern on the paper with the paracord. You follow the lines around the pattern, hitting consecutive numbers along the way. number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Every time you cross a piece of paracord that's already laid down, you must decide whether to cross over it or under it. If the crossing point on the pattern has an open circle on it, then you pass under the paracord that is already there. If there is no circle, just a crossing point, you pass over the paracord that is already there. So here I follow the line from S past point 1, around the corner and past point 2. Then past 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 until I have to recross point 3. At this crossing point there's no circle, so I pass over the paracord that's already there. I carry on past points 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13 and arrive at the next decision point, point 14. This crossing point does have a circle on it, so I have to pass under the paracord that is already there. When you're threading paracord, be careful. It can be helpful to hold onto the last corner you went around so you don't lose control of anything you've already done. If a bit of paracord jumps a pin while you're not looking, it can really confuse matters later on. Continuing down, at number 10 we go over the top. Then at 16 there's a circle, so we go underneath. That's it. Leave the trailing end loose and have a check over the pattern to see if there are any obvious problems. It's useful to note that, with the exception of the central horizontal section crossing the two trailing ends of the cord, the pattern follows a strict over and under alternating pattern. Checking for that is a great way of checking you've got it right so far. Pause the video now if you want to check your pattern against this one. The next stage is to double the knot, either using another piece of paracord or the same one if you're using a longer 6 metre piece. If you've used a 6 metre piece of paracord, you can start to double the knot by following the dotted lines on the pattern marked D. Then follow the previous piece of paracord exactly. I'm using a second contrasting piece of red paracord, so it's easier to see what I'm doing for this demo. I'm going to start by poking the end of the red cord through the start hole and tying a knot at the back, exactly as we did at the beginning. Now I'm simply going to follow the previous piece of paracord exactly, wherever it goes. The first crossing goes under, then over. Try and keep the second piece of cord on the same side as the previous piece all the way around. That's it. We've doubled the knot and now we're ready for the next stage. Pause the video here if you want to check your knot against this one. The final stage is to take the knot off the board and tighten it around the core. First, retrieve the starting ends from the hole in the board. We need both ends to come out of the knot on the same side. Next, take all of the notice board pins out of the board without disturbing the knot and put them somewhere safe. Now you can get rid of everything else except the knot, but again be careful you don't disturb the knot too much. And you'll need the core we made earlier. Next is the tricky bit. The way I approach this is to take the trailing leads and put them between two fingers. Then I lift the whole thing up and turn my hand over so it supports the pattern and lets the trailing leads hang down out of the way. Now put the core on top of the pattern. Keeping the core there helps to keep the knot in order. If I now gently make the knot a little more bowl shaped, you'll be able to see how it might start to wrap around the core. Eventually, the much longer outside strands will wrap around and be the ones that cover the side of the core nearest me. In order to start tightening and making that happen, I'm going to pick one of the longer outside pairs of strands and tighten it just a little bit. It doesn't matter which way you go, but it is important that you only pull through a couple of centimetres to start with. This is a very gradual process. Pull that couple of centimetres of slack through the whole knot until one of the trailing leads takes up the slack and gets a little bit longer. Now you'll find that if you make the bowl shape again, the knot will be a little more willing to wrap around and become a sphere. Now choose the next longest pair and do the same thing again. Make sure the knot pattern stays recognisable throughout and strands don't get pulled too far or round the wrong side of the knot. It's also a good thing to keep the two coloured strands from crossing over each other now, as that's more difficult to correct later on. As you can see, with only two pairs tightened slightly, the knot is looking more and more like it's going to wrap around the core. Keep going like this until you have a complete but loose ball around the core. Now the knot's starting to look like a sphere. From now on, we also need to keep making sure that the strands are distributed evenly and don't clump into one area. If you create even spacing, the globe tends to take care of itself. Now continue to tighten the knot as before and keep checking for even spacing. As the knot becomes tighter, the fid becomes useful for getting under strands and pulling them through. Be careful not to over tighten with the fid in case you distort the sphere. This is still a gradual process. And that's about it. Now all you have to do is decide what to do with it. You could make a loop with a simple overhand knot and thread a split ring on, or use a carabiner to make a nice fob, or you could investigate lanyard knots and sinnets and plaits and do something a bit more ambitious.